My name is Cristina Jimenez, and I lead United We Dream. We're the largest immigrant youth-led organization in the country, and I came to being part of a group of young people in the early 2000s that dreamed about creating an organization like United We Dream out of my own personal experience and many of us as immigrants.
Hello, and welcome to When We Fight, We Win.
My name is Dey Hernandez.
And I'm Greg Jobin Leeds. We're the authors of the book, When We Fight, We Win. In the book, we capture some of the stories, philosophy, tactics, and art of the leading social change movements in the United States. Now, through this podcast, we want to share some new stories and lessons of the present day and past movements. We want to learn from the folks who are out there on the front lines fighting, and through their stories, understand the root causes of today's growing troubles. These stories may flip a switch inside you, our listeners' minds and heart, and inspire you as it inspires us here at When We Fight, We Win.
Today we interviewed Cristina Jimenez from the organization United We Dream. We will hear her story, a transformational journey of an undocumented girl from Queens who in the space of just over a decade became one of the most fierce activists and organizers in the fight for justice for undocumented people in the U.S. United We Dream is the largest immigrant youth-led community in the country, creating welcoming spaces for young people, regardless of immigration status, to support, engage, and empower them to make their voice heard and win. United We Dream has an online reach of over 4 million and is made up of over 400,000 members as well as 5 statewide branches and over 100 local groups across 28 states. Over 60% of their members are women and 20% identify as LGBTQ. Chapter 1. The Pain.
Asking a person where you are from can be a complicated and loaded question. For some, it's like a snapshot that captures one moment of a life. For millions of immigrants, though, this can be a charged and layered question of a story woven together with complexities of the material conditions that forces one to leave their original home and their country.
We asked Cristina this very question. Where are you from?
I was originally born in Ecuador, and my parents had big aspirations and a commitment to ensuring that their kids will have a better life. My mother grew up in a home where they didn't believe in women going to school, so she always had a dream of her daughter being the first one to get an education, go to college. And my dad grew up homeless in Ecuador as a child and a teenager. So for him, the dream of ensuring that there was always food on the table for his family and a roof, was really precious to him. And in the 1990s, my parents were impacted by political and economic factors in the country that led to various things happening. And, I remember my parents looking for jobs constantly, but there will just be no opportunities and no jobs. And we started to experience moments in our family where sometimes we wouldn't have money for food and we couldn't pay for school anymore. When we left in 1998, my parents made the very courageous decision to leave everything behind and leave their families and what they knew and, their culture and their language behind to seek a better life here in the U.S. And, certainly as I look at and reflect on my family's experience, when you are on the brink of not having food to eat and as a parent you don't have anything to feed your children, coming to the U.S. and having job and having food on the table, having a place to live, which we did, all I think speak to things that we couldn't have in Ecuador. and that I feel, reflects some of the best in terms of what immigrants get to experience here in comparison to the poverty and the struggles that we face in the countries where we come from.
We asked Cristina about the forces that create the conditions for families such as hers to have to leave their homes and migrate.
What sometimes people, don't know, it's how much the foreign policy of the U.S. and U.S. intervention shapes the economic and political conditions of many of the countries where people end up, fleeing and migrating. For the case of Ecuador, I didn't know this then as a teenager or a young person. But what I know now is that the U.S. backed the banks in the country to have control over the economy and steal people's money. And, banks shut down from one day to another, and people ended up losing lifelong savings. And that led to millions of people in Ecuador left unemployed. And for many of the immigrant communities that I am part of and that I work with, particularly from places like Central America and Mexico, there is a very clear correlation between NAFTA and the fair trade that was agreed with Canada and Mexico also around the same time, that led to many of the immigrants that have fled Mexico, again, seeking jobs and opportunity and a better life for their families here.
Cristina recounted the daily experiences of fear and struggle which she had to face living as an undocumented immigrant. The idea of seeking a better life for Cristina and her family was overshadowed by the conditions that people of color have to face in this country that continues to be fueled by white supremacy.
And I remember realizing very quickly that not only because of, being an undocumented immigrant, you have fear that people can find out, that you can get detained, that your parents could be detained, or that you could be deported, or your family could experience deportation. The history of this country is so much rooted in, nativism and white supremacy and systematic oppression and racism. And a lot of what we are exposed to is often the blaming of each other, right? So, immigrants take away jobs. This is why, poor whites or, communities of color don't have access to jobs now. Or in the case of the exploitation in the workplace, often there is the blaming of, a certain set of workers against the others. And so much of what we're seeing is like narratives and stories and arguments that are pitting us against each other, when in essence, what we are seeing is a really systems, institutions, and policies have been very intentionally designed to keep people poor, to oppress, poor communities of color in this country. And when we don't have, I think, a lot of acknowledgement of understanding the roots of this country, of genocide of Native American communities and slavery and the treatment of immigrants throughout history, whether they were Mexican American or Japanese American or, or Jews or Italians and Irish. I feel that for me, the perspective that I have now is, one, really knowing the history of this country and how that has impacted so much of the systems and institutions and laws that are generating so much inequity and injustice in this country, including, right, the current targeting and scapegoating of immigrants.
Chapter 2, The Fight.
We asked Cristina if she remembered a particular moment when she realized that the only way to fight for the rights of the undocumented was through organizing.
The way that it happened for me is that when my college advisor said to me that because of my papers or lack of, I couldn't pursue college. And, and I had done everything that I could have to create like the strong profile of a college candidate, right? Like the community service and the honors classes and all of that. I was really disappointed and frustrated and was very ready to give up, actually. But then my mother pushed me and really encouraged me to go back to the school and to find out help and figure out how I could go to college. So as I was working on doing research online and talking to other teachers in the school, I found out about a local organization in New York City, and then eventually the statewide coalition for immigrant rights here, the New York Immigration Coalition, and ended up going to one of their meetings because of that. So that was my first, entry point to organizing and to activism. And, the rest is history after that first meeting, when I didn't share that I was undocumented because I was really afraid. But, I said that I wanted to help students, figure out the college system. And I wanted to understand what, immigrant communities could do to reach their dreams of a college education. And that was my entry point to then becoming really committed to organize and to advocate for justice for immigrant communities.
The battle to gain access to college was moving Christina towards activism, but it was the injustices of what happened to Walter that compelled her to stand up and start organizing. This organizing would later become United We Dream.
Walter didn't have immigration status. He was undocumented, and he was immediately arrested and forced out of the train. He was put in jail in Buffalo, New York, and he was issued an order of deportation by the federal government. And I got a call at 5 a.m. from his sister, who told me that Walter had been detained and was in jail, and that he had been ordered a deportation. And for an immigrant, that is the greatest fear that you have, that a loved one, was a family or friend, will be at the risk of being deported. And so we, came together. I remember convening with many other young people that were planning to go to that meeting that at that point was canceled because Walter had been detained. And so all of us jumped on different phone calls and developed a campaign to keep Walter home.
As family and friends in her community united in solidarity, Cristina was entering uncharted territory in organizing and explained us how the campaign to free Walter unfolded.
It was through Walter's campaign that I became a believer in organizing and that I saw that organizing work. So that was like my first, taste of organizing power, which then really has become a journey of the last decade and more of organizing undocumented immigrants, particularly young people, to bring change to their communities. We mobilized phone calls from the faith community, from educators. We engaged the New York senators at the time. We bombarded and flooded the phone lines of the facility where he was being held, the detention camp where he was being held. And all of our pressure and the letters that were written by his teachers and people in the community and the engagement of policymakers led to Walter being freed. And for me, it was a turning point in my life, because what was clear from this situation were two things. One, that organizing worked and we were able to stop Walter's deportation. And two, that I wanted to make sure that we in our community didn't have anyone that had to go through what Walter and many of us close to him had to go through for, the risk of his deportation. And, that to me, it's the day when I made a commitment to do this work for the long term of organizing communities impacted by injustice and bringing change We did all of this work with United We Dream. At the time, we were not, formal organization, but more or less an informal coalition of young people who were undocumented in different states.
And this leads us to the segment, The Word of the Day, with our resident wordsmith and editor of the book, Jorge Diaz. Jorge is a founding member of Agitarte. Agitarte is an organization of working class artists and cultural organizers that I'm also part of. We create projects and practices of cultural solidarity with grassroots struggles. We also lead community-based educational and arts programs, along with projects that agitate in the struggle for liberation.
My name is Jorge Diaz, and this is the word of the day. The word of the day is undocumented. The term undocumented immigrant refers to a foreign-born person residing in a given country without the legal right to be in that country. The history of immigration in the United States is fraught with racist and discriminatory practices that criminalize and marginalize those who come to this country seeking refuge and other possibilities for their lives and their families. Undocumented immigrants, often referred to by the government as illegal aliens, are subjected to racial profiling, forced separation from their families and their homes, workplace raids, being illegally and inhumanly detained, placed in detention centers, children being caged and separated from their families, police brutality, violence, and sexual abuse. Words and the ideas they transmit matter. They shape our narratives and worldviews. And in the discourse around immigration in the United States, there is a history of violent and dehumanizing labels, slurs and slogans thrown towards immigrants, and especially towards those who are non-white and undocumented. The President of the United States has systematically used his most hateful language, inciting racism and violence towards immigrants, using such rhetoric as illegals, bad hombres, and vilifying Mexican and Central American immigrants as criminals and rapists. Trump's Mexico border wall and zero tolerance campaign normalizes once again the use of the term illegals. This label is often used in mainstream discourse interchangeably with the term undocumented immigrant. The term illegals is employed by white nationalists to criminalize and dehumanize immigrants, especially black and brown folks. Actions matter the most, and there is a relentless attack on immigrants, especially since the establishment of ICE after 9/11, which has had disastrous effects on our communities and lives. Citing a Pew Research Center study based on the numbers from the federal government, and I quote, "The number of immigrant apprehensions at the U.S.-Mexico border rose in fiscal year 2019 to its highest annual level in 12 years. The 851,508 apprehensions recorded last fiscal year were more than double the number the year before, but still well short of the levels in the early 2000s. End of quote. The experiences of the lives of immigrants throughout the history of the United States who faced exploitation, racism, deportation, and other oppressive conditions are emblematic of the struggles of millions of undocumented people who deal daily with isolation from peers, the struggle to pursue an education, fears of detention and deportation, and the trauma of separation from family and loved ones. The immigration movement has fought for years to transform the reality of immigrants in this country and to call attention to the U.S. imperialist practices all over the world, and particularly in Latin America. Conditions which make migration a necessity for millions of our people. People who struggle, people who live, who work, and who know that to survive, we have to fight in solidarity for our lives and to win. This has been the word of the day.
Christina came to the USA when she was just 13 years old. Over the next decade, she watched families like her own suffer in pain and struggle. She came to the realization that the only way for her to see real change was to organize. In 2008, with the help of other young undocumented folks in her community, she created United We Dream. Christina was just 23 years old. In the 12 years after, United We Dream has been transformed from a handful of people trying to free Walter, New York, into a national grassroots movement organization with over 400,000 members. We asked Christina how this happened in such a short time.
Those were some of the origins, I will say, of our genesis story of United We Dream. And many of us were working in our local states, whether that was Texas or California or Massachusetts, where everyone was either leading a local campaign to get their states to allow undocumented students to go to college, or people were working on deportation campaigns, just like the one that I described with Walter. And everyone was working together on pushing for the DREAM Act at the federal level, which is a bill that was introduced in 2001 that would allow undocumented young people to apply for a pathway to citizenship. And so all of those things brought us together in addition to our undocumented experience. And we decided that, we couldn't fight one deportation at a time in isolation, that we couldn't support each other unless we built a bigger community, and that to maximize our efforts, we needed to create a space where young people can come together. So in 2008, we decided to create United We Dream to be a national network led by people impacted by the injustices of immigration and the immigration system. We created the organization with a very specific goal of a national campaign around the DREAM Act.
And they need us to enact comprehensive immigration reform. We need to do it by the end of my first term as President of the United States of America.
In 2008, Barack Obama promised he would reform immigration in his first 4 years. But it's been 2 terms, and a comprehensive immigration bill still hasn't passed. Here's what happened. Let's start with Obama's first term. In 2009, the country was in a recession and involved in 2 wars. And Obama's proposed healthcare bill was also getting a lot of backlash. Remember this?
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally.
Yet, while dealing with all of that, Obama continued to push his immigration agenda. He met with party leaders.
We have just finished what I consider to be a very productive meeting.
He spoke at universities.
In some, the system is broken. And everybody knows it.
He traveled to border states.
And now we need Congress to catch up.
And he released proposals and policy campaigns.
But despite his best efforts, in his first term, 3 comprehensive immigration bills died in the House and Senate.
You promised that. A promise is a promise.
So I am happy to take responsibility for the fact that we didn't get it done, but I did not make a promise that I would get everything done, 100%.
9 days into Obama's second term, it was clear comprehensive immigration reform would be more of a focus when he gave this speech in Las Vegas.
Now's the time.
That momentum came from 8 senators who introduced a comprehensive bill that later passed in the Senate. But that bill didn't go any further, and House Democrats introduced a similar bill with a few changes. It died, and so did many others. Pro-immigration reform advocates became impatient as Obama continued to deport millions who were undocumented.
You have a power to stop deportation for all undocumented.
Actually, I don't.
And we led a campaign to pass the DREAM Act that culminated, and it passed the House and it fell short by 5 votes in the Senate. And this included, Democrats that did not vote with us, that if they would have voted with us, we would have passed the DREAM Act in 2010. And though that was a very difficult moment for our movement and our organization, I remember that being really a moment where as many of us were crying, we also had a resolve and a commitment to continue to fight for our communities.
We asked Christina how fighting for immigrants in this era of Trump has changed their organizing, and what the present situation is for immigrants in the USA today.
Bush started in creating the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and infusing more resources to Border Patrol that already existed has led to this being the agency that has the most resources combined out of all of the agencies in our federal government. This machine of targeting immigrants under the agency with ICE and Border Patrol also grew a lot under the Obama administration. And what you have today, it's an agency that was built in a bipartisan way, because even when Bush was president, Democrats supported the creation of the agency that has operated without accountability since day one. Obama deported over 3 million people. Even though he ran a campaign that was very pro-immigrant, he committed to keeping families together, to passing the DREAM Act, to passing immigration reform. And then under his administration, what we see is that he continues the tradition of the Bush administration. So when we get to Trump, what you actually see is a very well-oiled and resourced deportation machine that was built by Obama and Bush, and that now Trump has taken to the most extreme and radical, and really bringing a mass deportation agenda to life, going after immigrants from, putting kids in cages to separating them from their families at the border, those, folks that have been seeking asylum and seeking refuge from Central America, Mexico, and other countries, terminating programs like DACA that, it's one of our most significant victories on immigrations, and now even creating task force to take away people's naturalization or citizenship.
This image has become a powerful representation of the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration. A 2-year-old girl sobbing as U.S. Border Patrol agents searched her mother.
If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
The Trump White House's tactic of systematically separating migrant families is a dramatic shift. There have been cases of families being separated under the previous 2 administrations, but it's always been the exception, not the rule. That said, Trump's crackdowns are happening against the backdrop of more than a decade of stepped-up enforcement at the southern border. In 2005, President George W. Bush launched Operation Streamline along the Texas border. He was responding to a spike in apprehensions there. The program called for criminally prosecuting all migrants.
We're going to get control of our borders. We're going to make this country safer for all our citizens.
The idea of zero tolerance took root under Bush, and it's what Trump has used to model his policy after. The Bush-era program meant that migrants who were caught in certain border states were put through the criminal system, not civil immigration courts. It made exceptions for adults traveling with children, but others were ushered through mass trials aimed at deporting them quickly. It's a practice that's still around today. The Trump administration says it's now merely enforcing the letter of the law, but images of children in detention have made it hard to sell it in political terms, and humanitarian ones too.
Deploying many more agents and more resources for ICE to go after communities. Just recently they issue an order for a special unit of snipers to go into cities, also known as sanctuary cities. And we've seen them here in New York that, they are going into buildings, into homes, into churches, into schools. They're everywhere. It's not just at the border. It's inside our borders. And it is a very terrifying moment to be an immigrant, to be a person of color, to be undocumented, because the first thing of business that this president did on his first week was to issue an executive order that states that all immigrants, especially those who are undocumented, are a target for deportation. the Trump administration took what was built by Obama and Bush and built in a bipartisan way to unleash a force that is terrorizing immigrants.
Cristina outlined for us some of the incredible work United We Dream is doing, their programs, campaigns, and organizing. She explained how they're empowering thousands upon thousands of young people to become leaders in their communities all across the country.
Since we started the organization in 2008, we've trained over 65,000 young people in organizing and campaigning. Many of them have gone now to work in other parts of the progressive movement, whether that is labor unions or climate change. And many have gone to work for electoral campaigns, including presidential campaigns. Some of them, now that they've been able to get immigration status, are also running for office. That's been the case in places like California and Arizona. And so, that is much of our vision really coming true, that we imagine building an army of young people that will be empowered and rooted in their experience of being undocumented to fight for change for the community, and who, I will say, are not just fighting for the lives of immigrants, but are really fighting to save this democracy. Part of our strategies are also issue-based campaigns. So many young people right now are leading campaigns to change policies in their colleges and universities so that undocumented students are welcome and protected in those spaces. Many of them are leading local campaigns in their communities to get ICE out of their communities. And we have many young people right now as we speak that are working to get our communities counted in the census. And, I was just in a training that we hosted for 100 of our key leaders in Houston, Texas 2 weeks ago, where we started our training to make sure that we are ready for voter outreach and canvassing for this year's election.
Chapter 3, The Win.
Greg, this is the part that for me brings me the most hope these days. It's that I've never seen the level of participation, activism, and solidarity that I've seen. But I think that we are going through a very unprecedented moment of awakening in the country and in our communities.
Cristina recalled the inspiring story of an event that happened at LaGuardia Airport in New York. She shared this story with us. It's about solidarity between our communities.
Overnight, dozens of protesters organized at LaGuardia Airport, rallying for the rights of children separated from their families under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy at the border.
We're just here to support and show them love because no one should be separated from their mothers, from their families.
This was at the peak of the impact that the zero-tolerance policy was having in communities that were seeking refuge in the country at the border. And, thousands of children were being separated intentionally by the administration. And as all of this was happening, many of us in the community were grappling with the need to support the parents that we knew had been separated from their kids. So as we were doing all of this, we were also demanding that airlines did not cooperate with the administration to fly these children to different detention camps across the country. And United We Dream has been playing a leadership role in bringing together progressive organizations who support our cause and, who may not work with immigrant communities directly. So groups like Indivisible and Move On, and Stash, who's the director of Bend the Arc, and I have been working on all of these multiple fronts together. And then one night, she communicated with me that she got notice that American Airlines was still flying children to detention camps across the country, that some of them were being sent to New York, and that they were landing her and I said, what do we do? And I said, well, I think that we need to show up. We need to hold the airlines accountable, but we should also try to be in touch with these kids and see what we can do. And we need to call attention to what's happening, because this was also in the midst of us putting public pressure on the administration to stop the zero tolerance policy. So Stash and I met at LaGuardia Airport on a flight that was coming from Texas, American Airlines, landing in LaGuardia. Her and I sent text messages to many of our other organizer friends, Linda Sarsour. I reached out to friends at Make the Road New York and their staff there, and Stash, reached out to many of the members and leaders from Bend the Arc, and we reached out to all of our networks. And then we started tweeting, we're here. We are demanding that American Airlines keeps their word of not cooperating with the government. And also, the government was saying that they had stopped separating children, but we were saying, no, here they are. Like, they are sending these kids all across the country, and they're landing here in New York. And in a matter of 30 minutes, we had hundreds of people that showed up to LaGuardia Airport with signs that, said, we love you, we're fighting for you.
We are here to say that we're not going to stand for the criminalization of immigrants in this country. That the act of coming to this country to seek refuge is not a crime. That we are with our immigrant brothers and sisters. Who are in detention camps right now. At the border. And across the country.
And this was all the message to the children. And, I remember being able to clearly see 3 children that were holding plastic bags with their papers. They must have been, 10 and 6 and 7. And they were being handled by someone who claimed to be working for a shelter in New York. But we were able to tell them, and I remember this, I remember telling them, we're fighting for you, and we're going to keep fighting to reunite you with your family. And they just cried. And, all of this work now, that was one particular action that we took together, but all of the collective work that we did and many allies in solidarity really led to the administration ending the zero tolerance policy and the courts intervening, which was a huge victory. So they reversed their policy. But I think, the impact and the damage has already been done, and there's still thousands, about 5,000 children that are still separated from their families.
In our conversations with Cristina, we talked about common mistakes people in solidarity often make. Here's what she had to say.
At United We Dream, we have been successful in building the movement that we have, and we've won campaigns because one of our central values is that people closest to the pain are closest to the solutions. And, it's a basic organizing principle as well when you think about it. And so, one thing to consider as an ally is to know that people directly impacted should have the space and be empowered to come up with the solutions. And as an ally, you should support those solutions and work together to advance those strategies rooted in what people directly impacted need and have laid out. I think that it's something to be aware of.
As a founding director of United We Dream, Cristina grew her organization from a handful of friends and family in solidarity to the biggest immigrant youth movement in the United States. Reflecting on how far she has come, we asked her what's next.
I'm very clear that organizing, it's a life commitment that I have, and organizing can look differently in different ways. And even though right now, I cannot say I will be doing X, Y, and Z because I'm still, running our team in the organization. I know that organizing is my life purpose, and so I will continue to organize in a different way and in a different role. I'm very committed to communities of color and to young people, so I know that I will play a role in building and the supporting of that movement. There are a few projects in the media that I'm working on, where I'm working on a book to tell the story of our movement and my own story, as well as continuing to think about how to build independent political power in immigrant communities and among young people in particular. So lots of exciting opportunities ahead, but for me, the biggest thing is all that I've learned in United We Dream, and that it is thanks to the movement that we've built in United We Dream and the people of United We Dream over the years, many of them who are not, in an official role per se now, but that have been part of our network, is that I discover my purpose in life through this journey, and I'm very grateful for that.
In wrapping up, we ask all of our guests to leave us with a postcard, an image, if you will, of a vision for a radical imaginary future. Cristina left us with this beautiful picture.
I envision a way of life where young people of color and communities of color can walk in the street safely and not feel fear, could be thriving and living their best lives on whatever that would be. That's a saying at United We Dream. Even in the midst of the attacks, we're aiming and trying to live our best lives and be joyful. I envision a community of joy, a community of belonging, where people are welcome regardless of how they look, where they are, their accent, regardless of their immigration status, and where people can accomplish their dreams, whatever those dreams are. And, that's my hope for my family, my friends, the people in United We Dream, and for all people. And that's what, drives me and gives me the fuel for the work that I will continue to do and that I've been doing for the last years.
Thanks for listening to When We Fight, We Win, the podcast. Wondering how to get involved? Here's what Cristina hopes you, our audience, will do together with us after listening to this podcast.
You can check out United We Dream by going online, all of our social media, Facebook, Twitter, at United We Dream. Also our website, unitedwedream.org. And you can also find ways to engage by signing up to becoming a member of United We Dream or an ally supporter of United We Dream. And also by making a donation when you go to our website, unitedwedream.org. If you want to join us in stopping deportations and protecting our communities from deportation, you can join us by texting "Here to Stay," one word, "Here to Stay," to 877-877. So you just put in your phone 877-877 and text the word "Here to Stay," and you will be part of our network.
You can also find these links and other ways to get involved at our website, whenwefightwewin.com. This episode was produced by Osvaldo Budet. Juan Carlos Davila was our assistant producer. Yuri Losordo is our managing producer. The Word of the Day was hosted by our editor, Jorge Diaz. Part of this interview was recorded in Multitude, New York City by Amanda McLaughlin, Brandon Gruggle, and Eric Silver. Albino Mbie is our audio engineer. Our artwork was created by Jose Hernandez Diaz, and the music was generously shared by Reverend Sekou. Thanks to Talia Caro Cachimuel for the amazing social media help. We'd like to thanks to our friends at the New Press for letting us record part of this interview in their office. New Press is the publisher for When We Fight, We Win. It's available at our website, whenwefightwewin.com, and wherever books are sold.
Like what you heard? We invite you to share, subscribe, and rate us. And follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at When We Fight, We Win. And on Twitter at We Fight and Win. Have something on your mind? please email us at podcast@whenwefightwewin.com.